feel love is all around, in the sky and in the ground, in every single living thing, and in the song that I'm singing. There are children in the streets that have nothing to eat, yet their hearts are full of love. They are beings from above. Love's everywhere you go. All you have to do is open up your soul. Feel the love inside you grow. And take every chance you get to spread the love everywhere. Can you feel it in the air? It's spreading everywhere. Can you feel the love inside? It's spreading worldwide. With every step you take, there's pleasure, there is pain. Every being everywhere. Feel the love you share. Feel the love we share. Let it grow everywhere.
We gonna take this magical feeling, spread it around from when the sun rises till the evening. Let it touch the heart of the souls that are grieving, 'cause we rising and without you we ain't leaving.
Love is a really special thing. Can't be replaced with anything, including diamond rings and rich, wealthy kings. The offspring of a butterfly feels the love once it flies. Doesn't matter what your size, you'll feel the love inside. Now there's a thing called hate, and that's a classified mistake. There's only room for love today, so forget all the pain. Can you feel the love inside? It is spreading worldwide. With every step you take, there is pleasure, there is pain. Every being everywhere. Can you feel the love you share? Or feel the love we share? Let it grow everywhere.
We spreading love one at a time, one at a time. Doesn't matter your race, color, or size. All I know is that when I look into your eyes, love is all I wanna spread. I realize I love you. I say that truly from my heart, 'cause I know if I don't start now, who knows when we'll depart. I have faith that our love creates a spark that starts a flame that will erase all the dark, yeah. Imagine that, dark turn into light, just 'cause one of our hearts loosened up from its tight grip, so it touched the next with all its joy and brightness. And that's the story of how we ended this crisis.
Can you feel the love inside? It is spreading worldwide. With every step you take, there's pleasure, there is pain. Every being everywhere. Can you feel the love we share? Feel the love we share. Let it grow everywhere. Can you feel the love inside? It's spreading worldwide. With every step you take, there's pleasure, there is pain. Every being everywhere. Feel the love we share. Feel the love we share. Let it grow everywhere. Can you feel the love inside? It's spreading worldwide. With every step you take, there's pleasure, there is pain. Every being everywhere. Feel the love you share. Feel the love we share. Let it grow everywhere.
Good morning, and to each of you, a heartfelt welcome to the Emerson UU congregation of Marietta, Georgia, and our Zoom online Sunday service. Thank you, Bruce, for that wonderful music. My name is Michael Myers, and I am a leader of the Building IT Committee and a member of the worship team. I'd like to send a special welcome to those who may be joining our online service for the first time. We hope you are nourished in heart and mind by our worship today. As a Unitarian Universalist congregation, we welcome a wide variety of theological and spiritual beliefs. We honor the inherent worth and dignity of each and every person. Everyone is welcome here. If you would like to be on our mailing list to receive the Emerson notebook and information about all our upcoming activities and announcements, please go to emersonuu.org to subscribe. That is spelled out as EMERSONUU.org. Our speaker today is Dr. Miriam Brown Spiers. Dr. Miriam Brown Spiers is an assistant professor at Kennesaw State University. She serves as the program coordinator for Native American and Indigenous Studies, and she also teaches in the English, American Studies, and Gender and Women's Studies programs. She lives in Kennesaw with her husband, 5-year-old son, 3 cats, and a pandemic puppy. Following our service today, you're invited to attend our coffee time immediately following the service at this Zoom link. Second hour activities will also occur at 11:15. You can find a list of these activities at the bottom of the order of service at emersonuu.org. Our chalice lighting words today are a quote by Vine Delora Jr. of the Standing Rock Sioux. The vast majority of Indian tribal religions have a sacred center at a particular place. And now I will light the chalice. What little chalice I have. Here we go. As our service begins, please take a moment to greet those around you or online with our congregational affirmation. We need not think alike to love alike. In the spirit of beloved community, welcome to Emerson.
Robin Wall Kemmerer, an enrolled member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation and a professor of environmental biology, tells the story of Sky Woman who fell from the sky world to the earth. Kemmerer says that it is also good to recall that when Sky Woman arrived here, she did not come alone. She was pregnant. Knowing her grandchildren would inherit the world she left behind, she did not work for flourishing in her time only. It was through her actions of reciprocity, the give and take with the land, that the original emigrant became indigenous. For all of us, becoming indigenous to a place means living as if your children's future mattered, to take care of the land as if our lives, both material and spiritual, depended on it. In the public arena, I've heard the Sky Woman's story told as a bauble of colorful folklore. But even when it is misunderstood, there is power in the telling. Most of my students have never heard the origin story of this land where they were born, but when I tell them, something begins to kindle behind their eyes. Can we all understand the Sky Woman story not as an artifact from the past, but as instructions for the future? Can a nation of emigrants once again follow her example to become native, to make a home?
Mother, I hear your heart beat. Ani gayali, uni no heta. Tita laniska, elohi, amegunge say. Kalala titla, utotla say, egwa, kalalohi. Naki, tu tana, stay ita, dutani day. Nutale, tu suwita, ge say, stay ita. Dul suwisa, cunning gesa, itika nahi. Iusti, God ka, lanito hai. Dik hala gadidla. Gigage, ul suwita. Atasni gohi stiski, aga watlay. Zuhya ladidla, sa konige, ul suwita. Atanetli sa huska, nole atahisti, aga watlay. Wudele gadidla, kanage, ul suwita. Ayo hu histi, aga watlay. Zugan awadidla, unaga, ul suwita. Nawak tohita, aga watlay. Nikata, ananota, aneha, kalalohi. Ase no, utalena se, anikalika. Igata inage anehi. Unis kwan goske. Anatan tehe. Guanotla tiki. Unade di.
Eduti, agiosi a.
Aguantida, se yo si hae. Igistika se digenasa, igadete. Elewa se yidi wata, lanuda lesa, igadete.
Jose skiiga jutlanude. Ahanji nutlanude amo eldidla.
Jiwinuju, yigesa, awasi, duwavdete ne. Awine wavedole, igastanti, iwagigesa. Sen doyutsiga yole, skia wina wadoste. Agilisi nehi eluwa jedaste, ujafatante igastante.
Ego hi hen amo ale aksti aya. Elisti henna, kilo nudale yiki, kanu hiti uwe daste yik. Slayo kilo usti yik ulo jinagwasti.
Yeda hada, skinusta. Ulskedia, tigalastante. Anida ge, yunadante negastis going.
Ayidu yikena, eduti. Yiganelti agigotuti, yusti ahu amo hawina.
Jadaxestesti, agilise.
Nowa, usti skoya, amai ehi. Wulu ta hawini, klawotiwu, iga, uwata hai. Duwuk tanai, uyohisti, katui. Katoi, uwotla di. Hilaski, iuwakti. Uweto lai, amego, hawini. Naki, iga ulosa. Ugo ti, uwutla ei, katu. Tlawotik, kati. Seskine, wanage ke sai. Tla, guwale ti yige sai. Kanoya gewu. Utel ho sai, aniso e. Inage, anehi. Uni nula ha, unale ti. Duwuk tana e, kalalohi, uwena sti.
O si wuju, hadeyagi, agilisi.
Aginula, agiwatuti, gohust egadeti. Tlawode yiga, gugayo hiskesu. Asen, naski, gadanehi, aleti. Eska, agiele eduti.
Tla, o sida nadaga, da kayo sida tlawote. Kohidi da tligli dole, ukayo este. Elewa, ekwa sula yigistela. tiga noge dekti ha ya kayo tanano lawote.
Inatugas heli
Ijia tada hagada hajawe solansta. Taziluche. Sule.
Kato usti. Kato yelta tisquade toti.
Agilisit lawote ha yoge gadu hamayo. It's kayo tan ugoda yadalada.
Kilon nudaleti tahati squi I kayo danehi tlawoti.
Lada kayo jiwa nudaleti ski yekeda. Nihe just gets kayo tohtaga don't. Jegwa deho hada ski hand use stick tohte.
Kato no uyelta ayo. Inigada nehi. Lasla ulske tigesa idigo tia.
Osteda negadi gadehti da dotlani. Nihina ijale liche hesti.
Hawa igane elta. Ase no. La iga tu stane. Iga wadanti iki.
Helowski iga. No hildo le sule. No do you wega udalena hey. Ni wo hi jana. Lati kano hildo hey. They go hata ta sans diske katui. No sule. They go hata elatidla I du sans tana. Du keta liya ta dotlanske. No le I du saldana. Totala ta dotlanske. Ulo sans tana. Do you wega ulena he. Nigata ukayototi katui. Kala lohi uwena sai.
Dagi awegi. Eller deres tieski. Laski se ukayoti yigi. Se udalula. Ukayohisti. Tlawoti.
Wato ulosas tana ijale liche si.
Wado Suli.
No wada. Igik tidistavo.
Unik tite. No. Kashwogi sinale. Toya. Ta tada huska ulena hai. Klasko. Ujatina. Igeta te hanga. Sina ahani. Ji teha kala lohi. Ji squat. Utlawita hai. Uktana sai. Squatta yiki. Katu. Unatati. Na hiu anita legi. Unate squat Go husti. Yata dahaska. No weli hi skana yiki. Gashwogi iga yaktita. Uwasa yata no hisi. Inage anehi. Unalena hei. Anega katu titla. Itse judotla sa unatati.
we promise to each other.
Our mission at Emerson is to seek truths, celebrate differences, act on our Unitarian universal principles, inspire the best in each of us, and serve the world. Our mission is made possible through the generous time, talent, and financial contributions of members, friends, and guests. One way we live into our mission is by partnering with other organizations committed to creating justice, peace, and compassion in the world. Each month, we choose an organization and encourage our members and friends to contribute both financially and through action to their own work. This month's partner organization is Lost and Found Youth. Lost and Found Youth strives to end homelessness for all LGBTQ youth by providing them with skills and support needed to live independently. They envision a world where all youth feel free and supported to live and love enthusiastically. At this time, we ask you to consider making a financial contribution to Emerson and to Lost and Found Youth. Our collection today will be shared equally between both organizations. Any amount is appreciated, and we thank you for putting your values into actions. Ways of giving will be listed on the screen. A link will be in the online chat, and you can also go to our website at emersonuu.org. You'll be directed to our online giving platform where you can contribute to Share the Basket. You will also have the option to make an additional contribution to Lost and Found Youth if you choose. The offering will now be received, and a message from the Lost and Found Youth will be shown.
40% of the homeless youth population identifies as LGBTQ. Lost and Found Youth's mission is to end homelessness for LGBTQ youth by providing them with the skills and support needed to live independently. More than half the homeless youth we serve were rejected by their families after they came out. Even on the street, they face discrimination, harassment, violence, and sexual abuse. Lost and Found youth are often their only refuge. Your support enables us to raise awareness and give homeless LGBTQ youth in Atlanta shelter, clothing, and food. Together, we create a network that maintains their physical and mental health needs. Support Lost and Found Youth today. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Susan Allman. I serve as a member of our Emerson Pastoral Care Team. We are available with listening ears and caring hearts to support you during challenging times. You can contact us at our email address, pastoralcare@emersonuu.org. At this time in our service, we pause to share personal joys, sorrows, and concerns of our Emerson community. Each Sunday, we light our Vigil Bowl. Its light represents the light of hope for peaceful resolution of conflicts on our planet. And it honors all dedicated people who serve us, including those serving on the front lines of the COVID-19 virus battle. We also light a special candle of acknowledgement for the Cherokee and Muskogee nations of people who lived on the land before us. May this candle remind us of our interconnection, and may our actions help heal all nations of people. This morning, we have not received any joys to share with you today. However, if you have a personal joy you want to share with our Emerson community, please feel free to type it into our chat. Candles are lit. Now I share a sorrow from years ago past Emerson UUC president, Ed Miller. He shares with the pastoral care team that his beloved wife, Patricia Kathleen Miller, died January 26th after a 3-year battle with liver cancer. They had been married 26 years. Our deepest sympathy goes to Ed, along with his and Patricia's families. He also wants us to know he's moved to and settled into Wynwood Retirement Community in Marietta. If you want to send a condolence card or a note to Ed, you can contact me for his address. Candles remain lit. If you have any additional sorrows or concerns you want to share, please feel free to type them into our chat now. We also know there may be things much too tender to share. Feel free to speak or type into the chat the name of someone you hold dear in your heart today. Now, let us send our heartfelt caring intentions to all people, everywhere, by offering the Buddhist prayer of loving kindness. The words are projected here and printed in your order of service. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May they be free from harm and suffering. May they be well in body, heart, and mind. May they be at peace. Blessed be.
Blessed be. Hey, y'all. Good morning. Madinva. For those of you I haven't yet met, I'm Lane LaFay, and this is the part of our service, the part of our day, and for some of us, the part of our week where we can take a few moments and breathe. I'll be suggesting a tree of life grounding. I find grounding to be an important practice for all of us when we get bad news, when we get good news, well, any news, any change, whether it's an up change, a down change, or that ever-present sideways change, just having the ability to ground any way that you do it allows this space to grow, this space where reaction can mature into response. So as grounding is important to our day-to-day life, you may wish to do this with your eyes open. But if you have just had enough of all that is in front of you and you'd like to just take a couple of minutes to yourself and prefer to have your eyes closed, you go right ahead or have soft focus. And as I say any of what it is that I'm about to say, please do whatever is comfortable or right for you to do, because you are your own spiritual authority. So with that said, if it feels good, let's just take a deep breath. Maybe just one more. And then just breathing as you do. The body has infinite wisdom. Begin to notice your body against the chair or the couch or the floor, wherever it is that you may have put your body this morning. Feeling the weight, the contact with the chair, perhaps you can start to feel that pull move from the center of your body and your hips down your legs and your lower extremities, and feel that pull go down through your feet onto the floor. And as you feel that heaviness, that weight, that attraction to the planet that holds you, imagine you have roots growing from your spine and your lower extremities, from your legs or feet. And see those roots going down through the floor, through the carpet, wood, and concrete, seeking and moving those curious roots going down through the topsoil and the dirt,
All for inviting me to speak with
down
you today.
and down past rocks, down and down through different layers of soil and history itself, feeling temperature changes, past pockets of water, and down all the way through the mantle of the earth to the heart of the planet, the iron core of Gaia herself. The iron in the core connects with the iron in your blood as one recognizes a long lost beloved child. And at this moment, if there is something that you want to release, maybe something you've been carrying, you've been keeping, and it just no longer serves you, this is the time to let it go. Just let it go into the core of the planet to be transformed into healing energy. And that might look like taking a deep breath and letting it go with a sound. So maybe it's just, maybe just one more. And the core reaches out with loving energy, and the roots of you drink it in, and you pull that energy up through your roots. Each breath in, that energy moves further up, moving closer to the surface, past the water pockets and around the rocks, up and up, through the dirt and the topsoil, up and up, through the floor, and now it's coming up through your feet, your legs, your lower extremities, your thighs, your hips, and it pools in the cauldron of your pelvic area, it warms your tummy, and then you feel your spine stretch like the trunk of a living tree. The warming, living energy from the core moves up and into your heart, where it cycles around. You take a deep breath, it feels good. Know you are supported and loved by your Earth Mother. And that energy now continues up through your shoulders, arms, upper extremities, your hands, and like branches forming, it reaches up and up. Branches sprout from your shoulders and your head like a grand crown. Branches reaching high into the sky and leafing and feeling the sunlight and the wind blowing through your branches. Feel the sun, feed from the sun. And as you inhale, pull that light into your leaves. And again, into your leaves and down your branches, which get thicker as you move to bringing that sunlight into your head, your shoulders, your arms, and your hands. Inhaling to bring that warm sunlight into your heart, where it mixes with that earth energy. And let's just breathe there for a minute, mixing that earth energy and the cosmic sky energy. And maybe that's inhaling from the sky and exhaling to the earth, and inhaling from the earth and exhaling to the sky, and seeing ourselves as that connection, that conduit between sky and ground, between heaven and earth, because that is what we are. If you have closed your eyes, I invite you to open them and come back to us fully in your body. Thank you for sharing with me.
you today. I am excited to talk to you about Native Americans' relationship with their land in both the past and the present. There's so much to say, and I know that it will be hard to fit it all into 20 minutes. So if you have questions for me at the end, I hope that you'll grab your coffee and come back to finish the conversation after the service. So before we get started today, I want to begin by acknowledging that I am speaking to you all from the traditional homelands of the Chalegi, or Cherokee people, who were forcibly and illegally removed from their land by the U.S. government in the 1830s. If you look at this map of the traditional Cherokee Nation, you'll see an arrow at the bottom center there. That's roughly where Cobb County is. The southern border of the Cherokee Nation was actually at the Chattahoochee River, so we're just at the very southern tip of Cherokee land. And when you keep going south, cross the Chattahoochee and go into Atlanta, then you are in Muskegee Creek territory. So today I do want to talk to you about the history of that removal, which we now refer to pretty broadly as the Trail of Tears, but I also want to tell you about life before and after the removal, and about the way that the Cherokee and many other Native nations have always understood their relationship with the land. So while I'll draw on specific history and culture of the Cherokee people, I'll also talk about other tribal nations located in other parts of the country. To understand that relationship, we first need to understand that there is no single monolithic Native American culture. When we say Native American, we're actually talking about hundreds of different groups. So the map you're looking at here is a map of Native nations by their traditional territory and traditional names. So some of their names for themselves, so that may look unfamiliar. So this is where folks were located before contact, but even today, there are over 500 federally recognized tribal nations in the US and many more in Canada. Each of these groups has their own language, culture, religion, government, history, and land. We can make broad generalizations about things that they tend to have in common, but there are always exceptions. So I will try to be tribally specific whenever possible. You can think of it a little bit like talking about European culture, right? There might be some unifying threads, but there's nothing you could say that would be true of every culture in Europe. So one thing that is common to most Native peoples is that their conception of land is radically different from the European and American understanding. From a Native American perspective, land cannot be owned. You can't put boundaries around it any more than you can put boundaries around air or water. Though you might try, there will inevitably be movement across those boundaries. So a group of people can live on and cultivate or care for land, but this does not give them an exclusive right to ownership. In some ways, this approach is quite practical. When you're talking about groups of people who hunt or fish, they needed to be able to move freely across large areas in order to follow game. So if you dammed the river or tried to fence in the plains, it would affect access to food sources like salmon or buffalo. This cultural difference became a major point of contention when Europeans arrived in North America. In many cases, Native communities believed that they were agreeing to share their land and resources because there was plenty to go around. But the European settlers interpreted those agreements as though they had been granted sole ownership of the land. For the colonists, ownership was established by making improvements to the land, cutting down trees and clearing brush, building permanent houses and barns, and erecting fences. Europeans and later Americans believed in using the land primarily for resource extraction, while Native peoples were more focused on maintaining a balance with their environment. Europeans often justified the taking of native land by arguing that the indigenous inhabitants were wasting it or failing to make use of it, which simply meant that they were not making the kinds of drastic changes to the landscape that Europeans were accustomed to. In fact, Europeans and Americans often described North America as an empty wilderness or a virgin land available for the taking. This helped to justify the conquest of this continent, but in reality, Native people were tending and caring for the land in ways that were not always recognizable to Europeans. This included tactics like using natural building materials that decomposed more quickly and made less of an environmental footprint, clearing the underbrush to prevent forest fires, and taking only the necessary natural resources rather than overfishing or clear-cutting the forest. In some cases, Europeans also missed important details because of their patriarchal view of the world. For instance, in many Native communities, women were responsible for the majority of the farming. Early European explorers, all of whom were male, failed to recognize this as real work because it was being done by women. Instead, they would describe the Native people they encountered as hunters because the men were responsible for hunting, which must mean that it was the primary food source for the group. In reality, while men and women had separate roles in Native communities, their shared goal was to maintain a healthy balance through these distinct gender roles. As opposed to the European idea of demonstrating productivity through individual and competitive resource extraction, Native peoples viewed the land as a communal resource. Everyone in the community worked together to grow and harvest crops. In this illustration from 1590, for instance, you can see the communal crops in the Powhatan village of Secauton. Similarly, in the Cherokee Nation, each household would grow a small kitchen garden outside their individual homes, but large crops like corn were grown communally and shared with all. So in the drawing we're looking at here, or the engraving, if you look on the right-hand side of the screen in particular, you'll see where large communal crops that require more land have been planted, and these would have been shared within, the whole community would have tended for them. A portion of each harvest would often be set aside in communal storage, where it would be available for emergencies or to share with visitors as needed. Only improvements on the land, such as houses, could be owned individually, while the land itself was always held collectively by the tribe. One of the many benefits of this model is that homelessness did not really exist in Native communities before contact. It was always possible to build a new home on unoccupied land, and unless there was a natural disaster, there were always enough resources available for building. So rather than possessing and controlling the land on which they live, Native cultures emphasized in the past and today that it is the people who belong to the land. Everyone has a responsibility to the world around them, a sentiment that is reflected in the short Lakota prayer, Mitakuye o Yasin, which is Lakota and translates to all my relations. The prayer includes not just humans, but also the land, animals, water, rocks, and sky. Everything on the earth, animate or not, is understood to be a valued part of the community, and all of those parts exist in relation to one another. And in fact, for the Lakota, rocks and stones also have some part of an animated spirit in them because they do occasionally move, right? There are rock slides. There are events where rocks move without humans helping. So importantly, this does not mean that Native people believe or believed in talking animals or magic rocks. There are plenty of Native scientists. Science is taught in reservation schools, right? They're not discarding Western science, but instead it just means that Native cultures think differently about interactions with the environment. By regarding the world through the lens of Mitakuye o Yasin, Native communities instill respect for the environment and emphasize the need to maintain balance in the natural world, something that has proven to be a real challenge for Euro-American culture. In fact, we can see the fault of the Euro-American strategy by examining the current climate crisis, which has been caused by excessive resource extraction and consumption. In other words, a failure to maintain balance or demonstrate respect for the natural world. So, traditional stories, sometimes referred to as oral stories, illustrate this relationship between humans and the world around them. Cherokee writer Tom King, who you can see here, makes this point by comparing the Cherokee and Judeo-Christian creation stories. You've already seen one version of the Cherokee story in today's Story for All Ages. The Beginning They Told, created by Cherokee artist and digital storyteller Joseph Erb, was the first computer-animated Native American traditional story to be told in an indigenous language. It begins when the earth was covered in water. The animals all lived in the sky world, which was starting to get crowded. They wondered if there was land under the water, and they took turns diving down below in search of mud. Many animals tried, but they all failed. Finally, the tiny water beetle volunteered. As you saw in Erb's film, she was hesitant at first because she was so small, but she tried anyway. And she succeeded. She found mud, which she brought to the surface and spread on Turtle's back. She continued to dive until she had brought up enough mud to cover Turtle's shell. And this is why North America is sometimes referred to as Turtle Island. This is just kind of a sketch, but you can see where the shape of the turtle comes from. Now, the animals realized that the mud is too wet to stand on, so they asked the birds for help. Grandfather Buzzard, who was the biggest of all, agreed to fly over the mud and dry it with his wings. It took a long time, and he got tired. When he flew too low, his wings dipped down and brushed the mud, which created hills and valleys. Today, those hills are the Appalachian Mountains. And finally, the animals were able to move from the sky world to Turtle Island, where there was enough room for everyone. Much like the story of Adam and Eve, the Cherokee creation story can be interpreted either literally or metaphorically. Many Cherokee people believe the story to be sacred without necessarily believing in talking animals. This story, like the creation story in any religious tradition, is sacred because it reflects Cherokee cultural values. King compares this story to the one found in Genesis, which begins with a perfect world that devolves, becoming imperfect after Eve eats from the tree of knowledge. The Cherokee story, on the other hand, emphasizes a world that improves over time, beginning with only water, then progressing to wet mud, and finally becoming dry land. It also shows a whole community coming together to create that better world through the actions of Water Beetle, Grandfather Buzzard, and all the animals that dove for mud, as opposed to creation by a single omniscient being, as in the Judeo-Christian story. Thus, the Cherokee story emphasizes the importance of community and collaboration. It teaches us that no one can do it alone, and even the smallest member of the community, like Water Beetle, can make important contributions. It also shows us that it's okay to make mistakes, like when some of the animals don't find mud, or when Buzzard's wings accidentally brush against the mud. We can adapt to the world around us and continue to improve it over time. In fact, mistakes can sometimes lead to something beautiful, like the Appalachian Mountains. So, how does this story relate back to Native American people's relationship to the land? Well, I will admit that, as an English professor, I really like an excuse to tell a story, and this is one of my favorites. But the Cherokee creation story also helps us understand how important place and land are to Native peoples. Standing Rock Sioux scholar and activist Vine Deloria tells us that most Native religions have a sacred center at a particular place. The reason that places are sacred to Native people is that each creation story locates a community, explaining where the people came from and describing the obstacles they surmounted as they developed their group identity. We've already seen that the Cherokee story references the Appalachian Mountains, while the Choctaw in Mississippi tell the story of emerging from below ground at a sacred mound, Nanawaya, which is still a protected site today. On the other side of the continent, the Navajo and Pueblo peoples of the Southwest believe that their creator placed them at the center of 4 sacred mountains: Blanca Peak to the east, Mount Taylor, which you see here, to the south, the San Francisco Peaks to the west, and Hesperus Peak to the north. The Navajo and the Pueblos believe that so long as they remain surrounded by these mountains, the Creator will protect them. If they leave this area, the Creator can no longer take care of them because the mountains can no longer watch over them. Echoing the Lakota belief in Mitakuye Oyasin, Laguna Pueblo author Leslie Marmon Silko explains, viewers are as much a part of the landscape as the boulders they stand on. There is no high mesa edge or mountain peak where one can stand and not immediately be part of all that surrounds. In other words, humans are part of the world and exist in relationship with it. They are not separate. They are not in control of it. They are simply part of it. To return again to the southeast and the Cherokee, we can see the importance of specific lands in the traditional story of Celu. Celu and her husband Kanati lived long ago. They had 2 sons, the good boy and the wild boy. Celu always provided corn, and Kanati always provided game to feed the family. One day, the boys became curious about where this food came from, so they followed their mother to the storehouse and hid behind the door. Thinking she was alone, Celu leaned over an empty basket and rubbed her belly, and suddenly the basket was full of corn. Then she leaned over and rubbed her armpits, and the basket was full of beans. Seeing this, the boys declared that their mother was a witch and concluded that they must kill her. When they confronted Celu, she already knew what was going to happen, so she gave them these instructions. When you have killed me, clear a large piece of ground in front of the house and drag my body 7 times around the circle. Then drag me 7 times over the ground inside the circle and stay up all night and watch, and in the morning you will have plenty of corn. Because Celu sacrificed herself to feed her sons, and by extension all the Cherokee people, she is called the Corn Mother. Corn is one of the most important foods for the Cherokee, who traditionally ground it for cornmeal, and the new crop is also celebrated each year at the green corn ceremony. Because this story focuses on the specific place where the boys dragged Celu's body, the Cherokee have a relationship to that specific land, just like the Navajo and the Pueblo have a relationship to the land located between their 4 sacred mountains. As we come to understand the sacred nature of Native Americans' relationship to their lands, we can also begin to understand how traumatic the loss of these lands has been to Native communities. This interactive map, which was created by University of Georgia historian Dr. Claudio Sant, shows the loss of Native land from 1776 to 1887. And I couldn't quite fit all of it onto the screen for you here, but I'll be happy to share that link with anybody who wants to go to the site. You can actually manipulate the time period and show reservations and kind of get a sense of the whole country, since we've really cut off the northeast and the west in this version. So both the Navajo and the Cherokee, as well as many other Native peoples, were forcibly removed from their homes by Europeans or Americans. In 1864, in an event referred to as the Long Walk, the U.S. military forced the Navajo to walk 400 miles from their home in Arizona to eastern New Mexico. In the southeast, the Choctaw, Muskogee Creek, Chickasaw, and Cherokee peoples were forcibly removed from their homes and forced to walk 1,000 miles, or sometimes much more, to Indian Territory, what we now know is the state of Oklahoma on the other side of the Mississippi River. The most famous part of this story, which is depicted in this exhibit that you see here from the Museum of the Cherokee Indian, is the Cherokee Removal, often referred to as the Trail of Tears, which took place in 1838. In Pushing the Bear, a historical novel about the removal, Cherokee author Diane Glancy imagines these events from the perspective of a young Cherokee woman who is both a wife and a mother, Maritol. As U.S. soldiers surround her community and force them out of their homes at gunpoint, Maritol thinks, "They couldn't remove us. Didn't the soldiers know we were the land? The corn stalks were our grandmothers. In our story of corn, a woman named Celu had been murdered by her sons. Where her blood fell, the corn grew. The corn stalks waved their arms, trying to hold us. Their voices were the long tassels reaching the air. Our spirits clung to them, our roots entwined. As we can see from Marital's description here, the land is intimately connected to the people, to their creation stories, to their ancestors, and to their cultural identity. In the 1990s, anthropologist Keith Basso worked with the Western Apache people who live in Sibique, Arizona. Working with the White Mountain Apache Tribal Council, he wrote about the relationship between land and story for the Western Apache people. Basso describes the importance of Apache place names, each of which refers to specific events that happened at that place. He explains that whenever one uses a place name, even unthinkingly, one is quoting ancestral speech, and that is not only good, but something to take seriously. So we see here that the land also connects the people to their ancestors, both literally in that their ancestors would be buried on the land, but also in that if you speak the Apache place names, then you are literally speaking the same words that the ancestors spoke when they named those places. Basso was guided by Charles Henry, an Apache man in his 60s, to create topographic maps with Apache place names, which would eventually become the foundation of a local Apache atlas. While visiting a place called Juniper Tree Stands Alone, Charles Henry tells the story of his ancestors who decided to plant corn and raise their families at this site. He imagines a conversation between the community leaders after several years of successful harvests. According to Charles, the leaders would have said, "These fields look after us by helping our corn to grow. Our children eat it and become strong. We eat it and continue to live. Our corn draws life from this earth, and we draw life from our corn. This earth is part of us. We are of this place. Juniper Tree Stands Alone. We are Juniper Tree Stands Alone people. This is how it shall be." Like Marital and her family in Pushing the Bear, the Apache people have built their identity on their relationship with the land. And in the picture here, you can see the People's Farm, or Nide Bikaya, which is a farm on the White Mountain Apache tribe's land, where they are growing blue corn today. The land protects the people by growing abundant crops of corn, which allow the people to survive. Their identity is wrapped up in the land and the crops that grow there, as reflected in the stories that the people tell about themselves. Like Deloria, who tells us that native religions are located at a sacred place, Basso observes that what matters to Apaches is where events occurred, not when, and what they serve to reveal about the development and character of Apache social life. Each native community has their own sacred land with its own stories, both mythical and historical, that shape the community's identity and relationship with the world. In 2021, Native nations are still fighting to protect and preserve their sacred lands. The most prominent example in recent years is the No Dapple protest that took place at the Standing Rock Indian Reservation in North Dakota in 2016. The Dakota Access Pipeline, which continues to operate today, runs underneath the Missouri River, half a mile from the Standing Rock Reservation. If the pipeline leaks near the river, as it has already done at other points along the pipeline, it could pollute the reservation's drinking water. Although courts have paused the construction multiple times, it continues to operate while the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers conducts a longer environmental review. Earlier this month, the Biden administration announced that they would not pause the pipeline during review. Beyond Standing Rock, Native communities fight to protect their lands in a variety of ways. In Utah, 5 tribal nations work with the Bureau of Land Management to co-manage Bears Ears National Monument, which former President Trump reduced from 1,351,849 acres to 201,876 acres in 2017. Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland, an enrolled member of the Laguna Pueblo Nation and the first Native American to hold this role, visited Bears Ears earlier this month, and the Navajo Nation has called on her to restore the monument. In Oklahoma, the Supreme Court recently ruled that much of the eastern portion of the state is still Native land, despite the state of Oklahoma's claim that the reservations had been dissolved. Nonetheless, many Native communities in Oklahoma continue to deal with the environmental effects of fracking. In Alaska, Native communities struggle to deal with the rapidly increasing effects of climate change. The reduced sea ice and rising temperatures have already forced some communities to relocate away from their homelands, and others are affected by growing food insecurity and increasing economic, social, and mental problems. In Hawaii, indigenous communities have protested the placement of the 30-meter telescope on Mauna Kea, which is a sacred site. In the West, Native nations in Nevada and Utah resist the placement of high-level nuclear waste disposal sites on reservation lands. In states like Wisconsin and Minnesota, Native communities continue to defend their treaty rights to fish on their traditional lands, rights that are often challenged by non-Native anglers. In each of these fights, Native nations continue to draw on the tools available to them, the traditional stories that reinforce Native values, the indigenous knowledge that offers alternate ways of framing humans' relationship with the land, and the political sovereignty that recognizes Native nations' right to self-determination. Native Americans have resisted the colonization and destruction of their land for centuries, and they continue to fight today. Thank you very much.
Far away from the rolling
In the settler mind, land was property, real estate, capital, or natural resources. But to our people, it was everything: identity, the connection to our ancestors, the home of our non-human kinfolk, our pharmacy, our library, the source of all that sustained us. Our lands were where our responsibility to the world was enacted, sacred ground. It belonged to itself. It was a gift, not a commodity, so it could never be bought or sold. These are the meanings people took with them when they were forced from their ancient homelands to new places. Whether it was their homeland or the new land forced upon them, land held in common gave people strength. It gave them something to fight for.
Before we extinguish the chalice, I'd like to announce that Emerson will be sending a COVID-19 survey to everyone today. Emerson is trying to determine if we can return to having services in our sanctuary with an audience. As such, we need your input to make that determination. We ask that you complete the survey as soon as possible. As we extinguish the chalice, I ask that you join with me in the final response written in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world until we are together again. The sermon is over. May the service begin, and have a good day.